This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Ethiopia heads to the polls as voters set to elect national and regional parliamentarians on Monday. The West African Regional Bloc adopts a new plan to launch a single currency in 2027. And over 1 billion vaccine jabs administered on the Chinese mainland. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also ahead on the program. In business news, the Chinese firm launches a $110 million expansion project on Ethiopia's Mojo Dry port. And coming up in your sports news, corruption purge at CAF sees 5 top officials sent home by the new executive. We begin in Ethiopia, where the country's twice-delayed elections will be taking place next week. About 37 million people out of about 110 million have registered to cast ballots on Monday, although many will have to wait until September to vote due to logistical, legal and security-related challenges. Voters will elect national and regional parliamentarians. The polls will mark the first test of voter support for Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Abiy's appointment as Prime Minister in 2018 came after years of anti-government protest forced his predecessor, Haile Mariam Desalegn, to step down. Well, let's cross over to Girum Chala. He's joining us now with more from Addis Ababa. Girum, some 37 million Ethiopians are expected to cast their vote on Monday. How is Ethiopia prepared?
38.2 million registered voters, Beatrice, more than 9,300 candidates and 48,000 polling stations are prepared for Ethiopia's 6th round of general elections, and things look very promising in this country. We have tried to see some of the polling stations from outside this morning as well for tomorrow's voting, and we've seen that things are pretty normal, and preparations are almost over everywhere. So we can say that Ethiopia is ready for its 6th round of elections, and more than 37 million people are expected to cast their votes out of the 38.2 million registered voters, Beatrice. So things are promising, things are looking good, and we're expecting peaceful elections to be held tomorrow.
Well, Girum, political parties wrapped up campaigns on Friday. What has been the message from the various parties?
For the last few months, including the ruling Prosperity Party and many others, have been staging strong campaigns, election campaigns, that is, so that they can get votes from the public. For the next 5 years, that vote is going to determine which party or individual is going to hold office and even get membership of the Ethiopia's parliament. So far, the message is to hold peaceful elections. Everybody is promising development and peace for the country. Yesterday, we have seen the Prime Minister calling on all parties together for a dinner reception and a well-wishing event, and at that event he said that every party needs to work for Ethiopia's well-being, and also he called for solidarity even after elections and to accept the election results, whether they are positive or negative for individuals or parties. So far all of them seem to be on the same boat, and we should wait and see tomorrow or after the announcement of the election results if that's going to be the case. But so far everybody is speaking the same language of peaceful elections to be held in this country.
Well, it has remained peaceful so far, Girum, but some prominent opposition parties have said they will boycott the polls. What do we know about that? What can you tell us?
Well, the Ethiopian National Election Authority has been saying that some parties have reported abuse from authorities, the security force, and some candidates were even imprisoned, and it has tried to intervene, especially in the southern region state, and freed those candidates. It has expressed its dismay, its disappointment of the security force handling of situations. But this thing, Beatrice, is not really extended across the country. By and large, everything seems to be peaceful, and every party member seems to be happy with the way things are organized, relatively speaking. But as you've said, there are also disappointments from parties, and parties were promising that they'll boycott elections. But so far, there is no official announcement from any party member that says it is not going to run in tomorrow's election. So far, things seems to be very, very, very promising and positive.
All right, Girum Chala joining us there from Addis Ababa. Leaders from the West African Regional Bloc ECOWAS have concluded their summit in Ghana. The group of 15 West African countries have adopted a new roadmap to launch a single currency in 2027. Previous plans were derailed by the coronavirus pandemic. West African countries hope a single currency will help boost trade and economic growth. Leaders at the summit also discussed a COVID-19 vaccine supply. Ghana, Nigeria and Senegal have been encouraged to continue to work on producing vaccines locally. Well, let's cross over to Nabil Ahmed Rufai. He's in Ghana. He's in Accra for us. He's joining us live from there. Nabil, many items were on the agenda for the one-day summit. What are some of the resolutions coming out of the ECOWAS meeting?
Indeed, Beatrice, a lot of issues were discussed at the summit yesterday, and one key thing had to do with the insecurity that's threatening the peace and stability in the West African sub-region. And the leaders have actually agreed to implement the regional, the security regional plan that was adopted in 2019. Now, they hope by implementing this particular plan, they will be able to tackle the threats of insecurity in the region. Now, another issue that also came to the fore has to do with the maritime crimes that have increased over the past year. And the leaders say through the security regional plan, they should be able to fight piracy and attacks especially on the Gulf of Guinea. Now, away from insecurity issues, COVID-19 also featured prominently during the discussions. And when the pandemic hit and as restrictions were eased, the ECOWAS community decided they were going to reduce the a fee that they were charging at the airports to $50. And some of the members were implementing this particular $50 fee per test of COVID-19 at the airports, but others were not implementing it. So at this particular summit, the leaders have agreed to all, go by the $50 cap that has been given per the testing of COVID-19 at the airports to allow free movement of people. And also issues about vaccine. Of course, we know that Senegal, Nigeria, and Ghana have demonstrated a capacity to produce vaccines in order to tackle the slump in supply. And this is something that the ECOWAS leaders have agreed to all come together to push this particular effort, so that they believe that when these three countries are able to produce the vaccines locally, then they will be able to supply to the rest of the West African countries to also roll out their vaccination. Right. Also, aside this, there was an issue that had to do with the fact that Senegal had closed its borders to Gambia, and they've agreed to open their borders to the Gambia. Beatrice.
Well, Nabil, I just want to go back to that question of capacity to produce vaccines across the continent. And you have mentioned that there are three countries that have shown the capability. Now, ECOWAS chairman, who is Ghana's president, Nana Akufo-Addo, has called for West Africa to enhance its production capability for the COVID-19 vaccines. How exactly does he see this being done, and what is the time span for this?
Well, they did not give the time frame as to how they would want to implement this particular thing in terms of production of COVID-19 vaccines. But what he said was actually the fact that there is an urgent need for these countries to look into the possibility of producing the vaccines. Although they were happy that the G7 have agreed to give developing countries some vaccines, they believe that will not be enough for the African countries to achieve herd immunity. And they believe that going by the production of COVID-19 vaccines locally in these West African countries is a sure way to go. It's something that they've said is still under deliberation. They're still discussing it to find the way forward as to how they will be able to really achieve this. But it's something that they really want to do, and they've all shown the commitment to do so, Beatrice. All right,
Nabil Ahmed Rufai joining us there from Accra in Ghana. Chinese health authorities say the mainland has administered more than 1 billion COVID-19 vaccine doses. And the Foreign Ministry says China has provided over 350 million doses to other countries and regions. The World Health Organization approved 2 Chinese-made vaccines, Sinopharm in May and Sinovac in June, for global emergency use. Meanwhile, Uganda has entered a strict 6-week lockdown in order to try and prevent the continued surge in COVID-19 infections. The spike in cases has overwhelmed the country's healthcare system, with many hospitals running out of medical supplies. Uganda has registered more than 70,000 cases and over 650 deaths, according to the latest figures from the Health Ministry. CGTN's Michael Baleke has more.
In a televised address to the nation, the Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni banned public and private transport. Only emergency vehicles and essential workers are allowed to move. Schools, colleges, worship places, entertainment and sports events will remain closed for the next 42 days.
These are urgent and temporary but extraordinary measures which we as the nation must jointly and fully embrace to protect and preserve our lives, our ways of life, the way we live and our future.
More than 1,000 patients are admitted to different health centers across the country, but many are scattered in private health facilities while other cases are being managed at home. Some Ugandans are not happy with the lockdown.
We have no food at home. We have loans. The landlords need their money. They will not listen to excuses. They would have allowed us to go to the village to pick some food. We are restless. This is not right.
The disease will not be eliminated today. They should allow people to move because even without cars, we are moving and the privileged are driving their vehicles freely. It's a waste of time.
Health officials say the country has been registering more than 1,000 cases daily. Many of these are severe and critical. Uganda is entering a second major lockdown, and doctors say while the measures are important to slow down the spread of COVID-19 infections, staying home has come with increased stress, anxiety, and depression. Health professionals say since the onset of COVID-19 in the country, several health centers are reporting a rise in the number of patients seeking treatment for mental health issues.
If you have not heard from a person for 2 days and used to talk every day or 3 days, check on your people. But if you stay alone and there's no one checking on you, reach out to someone. It could be anyone, it could be a friend. Respond to a status. Ask for help. Very many people are not asking for this help because they fear the social stigma that they will face after they've declared that, you know what? In fact, most people are telling us after they're almost on their journey to recovery.
President Museveni says the government is also negotiating with partners like China to source for additional doses of COVID-19 vaccines. He believes when more people get vaccinated, fewer numbers will require hospitalization. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
The International Labour Organization has called for the creation of more protection measures for employees facing job losses during the pandemic. Employers as well as employees have had to find innovative ways to survive as many businesses shut down during long lockdowns. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
The global economy shed over 100 million jobs since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Delegates at the International Work Summit in Geneva heard of worsening inequality, especially among young people and women.
When the world has been hit by something which has increased unemployment by unprecedented numbers, when it's thrust more than 100 million working people into poverty, then clearly people look for protection. They need help. And that's where social protection comes in. And the bad news is our social protection systems pre-pandemic were really deficient.
South African entrepreneur Flower Walker had little help from government when COVID-19 hit. She watched Petals, her 54-year-old events company, crumble when all events were cancelled.
They should have made more help available, but not only to the event industry, for the entire tourism industry. There should have been more funding made available. Where it's gone, how it's gone, nobody knows, but that should have been made to keep us alive.
The savvy businesswoman was able to reinvent her business. It was relaunched as the Flower Cafe at the height of the lockdown with a snazzy social media presence.
We were faced with a big dilemma, so I went to the staff and collectively we decided we're prepared to forge ahead and try and create something new. So we decided to dig into our own beauty. All the staff, it was very enthusiastically done, jumped up and said, let's get going. Let's turn this workspace into the magic that we know we can create.
Didn't have an Instagram profile before last year, so we needed to learn a lot, and we needed to learn a lot quickly. And like I said earlier, is that we were gifted time, and I can look back 10 months down now and say to us that we used our time wisely.
The business retained its 20 employees and now offers unique experiences using the language of flowers, including team-building workshops and masterclasses.
We partner with people doing radical creative things, and you get to do something that you cannot do anywhere else because it's curated specifically for this space with that person, whether it's ceramics or imprinting botanicals into ceramics, scenting your own events, creating your own fragrances with essential oils and blending all those beautiful things.
The focus of this year's summit is on the labour market and business navigating a way out of the pandemic. But on the ground, small enterprises like this one have had to adapt and transform or fail completely. Global leaders have been called on to map out a clear path to recovery to limit the effects of long-term economic damage as the pandemic drags on. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
The World Health Organization has officially announced the end of Guinea's second Ebola outbreak, which was declared on February the 14th. The latest outbreak saw 16 confirmed cases and 7 probable infections, according to the World Health Organization. 12 of these cases were fatal. CGTN's Mohamed Abubakar with more details.
The recent Ebola outbreak was the second upsurge in the West African country. It re-emerged in Guinea in mid-February, 5 years after the disease was eradicated in the region.
We are all happy. I am happy to solemnly declare on behalf of the President the end of the resurgence of Ebola in Guinea.
It has been 42 days, twice the incubation period for Ebola, since the last confirmed case of Ebola, which had been missed on follow-up, was considered to have zero risk of transmission in the community.
Putting an end to the recent Ebola outbreak was more of a team effort. The WHO helped ship around 24,000 Ebola vaccine doses to Guinea. The organization has also helped the vaccination of nearly 11,000 people at high risk, including over 2,800 frontline workers. Guinea's government, on the other hand, reacted quickly to this year's outbreak, building on its previous experience of fighting the disease. Mohamed Abubakar, CGTN.
And now to Iran's presidential election. The hardline judiciary chief Ebrahim Raisi has won a landslide victory. Election officials said about 62% of the votes went to Raisi, but the turnout was much lower than in previous elections, after several opponents were disqualified or dropped out. His remaining rivals have conceded defeat. The 60-year-old conservative cleric will take over from Hassan Rouhani at a critical time. The country is seeking to salvage a tattered nuclear deal and revive the economy. Ehsan Kevani has more from Tehran.
Raisi is enjoying a 62% vote and is expected to systematically fight corruption and practically eradicate embezzlement, which is among his main campaign slogans. Many who had voted for presidents such as Khatami and Rouhani did not vote this year because of frustration and seeing no improvement in the country's economy. For majority of people, reformists, moderates, and conservatives don't matter. They expect the new administration to fulfill its promises and move the country and economy towards the right track.
I congratulate my very dear brother. He has a very heavy responsibility. I have no doubt that the people will support his legitimate government so that their interests can be best implemented and operationalized.
One of the things we will pursue in our government is for all people to play a role, especially the elites and experts.
Raisi says he would enhance the country's economy and the manufacturing sector. Previous presidents had made similar claims, but in practice, U.S. sanctions and difficulties in accessing international markets stopped them. He says he would use the entire domestic potential to enhance the industry. Different lists have been published for the new cabinet, but they're all speculations, and we need to see if the president-elect would use any reformists in his administration.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. As countries mark the World Refugee Day, the UN says more than 82 million people worldwide have been displaced by war and poverty.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've been Shirushi, Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees says nearly 3 million people were forced to flee their homes last year. In its latest Global Trends report, the UNHCR says the cumulative total number of displaced people in the world has risen to 82 million. CGTN's Daniel Arap-Moy looks at Africa's refugee situation.
As of June 2021, an estimated 80,147 people had been displaced in Mozambique. Now, attacks by insurgents on the coastal town of Palma have forced many people to flee their homes. 3 years of turmoil in the north of the country has displaced nearly 700,000 people inside Mozambique. In Ethiopia, more than 1 million people were displaced in 2020, with more than 54,000 fleeing the Tigray region into eastern Sudan. UNHCR says conflict and the fallout from climate change in Ethiopia's Tigray region largely led to the displacement. Now, conflict in the Sahel has worsened and spread to new areas, making it the leading cause of displacement. In the Central Sahel and in the Lake Chad Basin, there are no signs that violence is reducing. Security incidents, attacks, and kidnappings are a daily reality for millions of civilians. Now, more than 5 million people have been uprooted by insecurity and violence in the Democratic Republic of Congo. In Ituri province alone, 1.7 million people have been displaced. Now, deadly attacks by the armed militant group Allied Democratic Forces have forced many to flee their homes. More than 200,000 people were recently displaced as a result of the volcanic eruption of Mount Nyiragongo. Approximately 8,000 people sought refuge in neighboring Rwanda. Back to you.
Daniel Arap-Moy there with the World Refugee Day. Well, Sunday marks the World Refugee Day, a chance to honor people displaced from their homes across the globe every year. War, persecution and disaster are some of the causes that force people to flee their homes. But one academy in Kenya is using athletics to give refugees a chance at a better life. Sportsmen and women at the Tegla Lorupe Peace Foundation are not only highlighting the plight of refugees around the world, but 4 have been selected as part of the second IOC Refugee Olympics team to compete at the Olympic Games this summer. Mahia Mutua has more.
As dawn breaks over the Ngong Hills, nearly 30 kilometers from Nairobi, the hard work begins for these athletes. Many of them are refugees forced from their homes in countries like South Sudan and Burundi. 4 of them will join the expanded 29-man team to represent refugees at the Tokyo Olympics, which was announced earlier this month, offering them an opportunity to compete against the best on the world stage. The 4 athletes, all from South Sudan, have made a home here and now train under the tutelage of former world marathon record holder Tegla Lorupe, who was the team's chef de mission to Rio in 2016. She believes in these athletes giving back down the road.
They want to get knowledge that tomorrow they go home and bring this knowledge to their relative or to their countrymen. Because you go somewhere and those athletes, they know that these are displaced athletes. Now they are going to Tokyo, or now they went to Rio. But when they go back to their country, they are the youths who are fighting. And these youths, they will see them as a role model. And they can do more things, they will have peace.
Rose Lokonyen was the flag bearer for the initial team to the Rio Olympic Games in 2016. For her and her teammates, the chance to return is an incredible honor. She says that her passion for peace and the rights of refugees continues to spur her on, especially in the face of stigma and oppression.
In life, you don't have to lose hope because we're all human beings and no one chooses to be a refugee. A refugee is just a status whereby one day, one time you can change your status as well through talent, through education, because we have so many different things that you want to do in life.
Most of the athletes here were forced to return to Kakuma refugee camp during COVID-19 lockdowns, keeping them away from their trainers, which severely hampered their development. A situation known all too well to people who've been forced from their homes.
When they hear the word refugee, they say, oh, refugees are not a human being. So for me, I can say, no, refugees are human beings like us. So he can talk, he can do something, can do anything like other people. So that's why I can say that for me as a refugee, first of all, so for me to go and represent refugee in the world, so it's not something very easy. So for me, I just encourage to make other young talented people so that to follow our footsteps, because I need them also to be like me.
Actually, refugees is a human being whereby they have talents and they are human beings whom they know that they can do better. And we really appreciate that we get this chance, not just because of me alone. It's for all the refugees around the world or youth, you know, because there are so many of them who can do well, but just because they did not get this chance.
Before, nobody wanted to see that the refugees are good people. They always think that the stigma around the refugees is kind of like they are criminals, not knowing that anybody can be a refugee. When you have conflict in your area, you end up being also displaced. But when the athletes went to Rio, the nations and the NOCs saw that there is need to support their talents. And like Kenya, we've been supported by our country, our nation, security-wise. Our athletes are training with our Kenyan athletes, and that is solidarity.
Under the banner of inclusion, this year's World Refugee Days themes fall under healing, learning, and for the 4 athletes here headed to the Tokyo Olympics, shining through sport. Representing the nearly 80 million people worldwide forced from their homes, their preparations have been made that much harder by the coronavirus pandemic. But as they join the 25 other sportsmen and women competing under the Olympic flag at this year's Games, they'll be seeking to not only restore and highlight the dignity and talent of the refugee athlete, but do so while competing for Olympic gold. Mahia Mutua, CGTN, Ngong, Kenya.
Well, in 2013, civil war in South Sudan forced many people to seek refuge in neighboring countries. Samuel Dol Ayon was one of them. As a teenager, he fled to Uganda. He has now graduated from medical school and has secured a better life outside his country. Nokutula Shabalala tells us his story.
8 years ago, fighting between government troops and opposition forces became intense in the South Sudanese capital of Juba. Fearing for his life, Samuel Dol Ayoun left his home and family. He sought refuge and an education in Uganda to better his life. Now, at the age of 27, Ayoun has graduated from medical school.
Most of my peers were claimed by measles. They died, and I was fortunate enough to have survived, despite the fact that there was no medical care at that time. So you were just at the mercy of the disease, and I think I survived it. And actually, it is one of the things that motivated me and inspired me to become a doctor and contribute in changing the healthcare system there and stopping preventable death.
Ayoun helps patients at the Mulago National Referral Hospital in the Ugandan capital, Kampala. His career in medicine is a huge achievement and a milestone for his family.
Considering where I've come from, my parents were really excited. They even had to commute all the way, to come all the way from the refugee camp, despite the challenges, to come and witness my graduation, because that was the first degree in the family. My mother has never been to school before.
Uganda is home to around 1.5 million refugees. It's the fourth largest refugee hosting nation in the world and the largest in Africa. Uganda's refugee policy permits refugees free movement and access to public services, including education and healthcare.
We have only about 20% of the refugees who are supposed to be in secondary school accessing it. And then we also have situations of overcrowding. And do they want to go back home? Like everybody would want to go back home, but that's not always an option available.
Ayoun was one of the lucky ones. And if he gets a chance to go back home, he hopes to inspire fellow South Sudanese.
Being a refugee it's not a punishment. It is an opportunity to continue with your dreams outside your country. So I intend to go and work as a lecturer so that I can give the knowledge that I've garnered here in Uganda to other South Sudanese, so that we can have a wide range of doctors.
His message captures his inspiring journey and story, one that many refugees across the world hope will showcase their potential in life. Nokutula Shabalala, CGTN.
China's recent declaration about ending extreme poverty has stirred debate in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Some analysts are calling on its leaders to emulate the Asian country's poverty eradication model. The debate follows an announcement by China's President Xi Jinping that his government has lifted nearly 100 million people out of extreme poverty over an 8-year period. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more from Kinshasa.
China and the DRC have had strong trade relations for decades, but the economies of the two countries are worlds apart. Millions of people in the DRC are still living in poverty, while China recently announced that it has eradicated extreme poverty. Some Congolese have commended China upon achieving that feat.
That is a big achievement, and I think this achievement is based on China's 5-year plan. Every 5 years, China plans its development, especially rural development. So I lived in China for 7 years, And now my friend just sent a message to me that when we are here, I used to go home during the holiday, during the Chinese New Year by bicycle or by train, but now I can drive to my village. So I laughed at that because the achievement is huge.
Eradicating poverty in rural areas in the northwest of China has been a key initiative of the Chinese government under President Xi Jinping. The government had to enforce discipline to achieve that.
In China, corruption is severely punished. If you are a leader, you are in a circle of power, but in a government at the national and the local level, you are treated equally. And if you embezzle the money, woe to you. Yeah, I can say I have the information when I was there when corrupt people were hung. So really, our government, African government, have to be strict on the issue of corruption.
Some experts have wondered how China has managed to lift 100 million people out of poverty within 8 years, as it put it. But what's without doubt is that China is now transformed from a traditional agricultural country to a modern industrial state.
But they've made a lot of progress because they understood what their most biggest dividend is the population. And they decided to build the economy all around the capacity of setting up an economy in the domestic space, which is the most powerful thing. The rest is slavery. That's what Africa needs to understand.
The DRC's economy is fueled by its natural resources. Most of the mines in the southeast of the DRC are dominated by Chinese investors. China's model of development has won many admirers in Africa, especially in countries that have benefited from huge Chinese infrastructure loans. Its policy of non-interference in the internal affairs of African countries has endeared it to many, but it remains to be seen whether African leaders will be able to harness the continent's natural resources and lift its people out of poverty in the near future. Chris Soshamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
The year 2021 marks the centenary of the Communist Party of China. South Sudan's governing party, the Sudan People's Liberation Movement, has congratulated the CPC for its huge achievement. The SPLM says it seeks to strengthen cooperation with China in a bid to share experiences on peace and development.
I visited Chinese projects. I went to Xinjiang, that area, and we went to areas where the CPC was working to alleviate poverty, people from poverty, and the projects they have created has brought millions of people out of poverty. And so China, in fact, is the first country to announce that the poverty has been consigned to history. And they are continuously, they have not stopped. They are still working. People first, in fact, is a policy. They are now getting it difficult to mobilize people to stand up, to work, to liberate themselves out of poverty. In fact, we are trying to copy what China does to be self-sufficient, so that we can also take our people out of poverty. We want to understand how they mobilize their people so that they can work for a common cause. Because when the idea is common among people, when it is understood by all the people, then they can work for a common purpose. CPC was very important for the history of China to be where it is today. So that long journey of 100 years with the people of China committed with all the challenges, all the sufferings, but still overcoming them, actually deserves them to be congratulated. I congratulate them for the long journey which they took.
And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. Chinese firm launches $110 million expansion project of Ethiopia's Mojo Dry Port. And Egypt's parliament approves the issuance of Sukuk bonds.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Ethiopia has started construction of a $110 million World Bank-funded dry port expansion in the country's central region. Authorities say the expansion of the Mojo dry port, which is being handled by the China Civil Engineering Construction Corporation, will modernize logistics in the landlocked country. CGTN's Alexandra Majala has the details.
The China Civil Engineering Construction Corporation, through a $110 million loan obtained from the World Bank, is upgrading the Mojo dry port. The Ethiopian facility will get an additional 6 warehouses, operating facilities, several roadworks, multi-purpose buildings, parking and greenery. Ethiopia's Transport Minister Dagmawit Moges says the expansion is of paramount importance in modernizing the landlocked country's logistics sector.
The purpose of this project is to scale up the capacity of the port as well as change its logistic facility entirely. It will also upgrade the Ethio-Djibouti railway capacity in order to handle the country's ever-increasing import and export endeavors.
The Mojo dry port is a key transportation and logistics facilitator between Ethiopia's hinterland and ports in neighboring Djibouti. It is also the logistics hub of the country, and the growth of the port will provide room for the town to advance.
Which is a transformative initiative which comprises comprehensive infrastructure enhancements of the port and associated facilities that are currently not available, such as export consolidation, dry bulk storage, and a multimodal transfer platform to make import-export more seamless.
Mojo dry port is located 73 kilometers from the capital Addis Ababa and was established in 2009. Currently, it's the largest inland port in Ethiopia, responsible for over 78% of import and export products in the country. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Egypt will start issuing Sukuk, or Sharia-compliant Islamic bonds, after the country's parliament granted final approval. Egyptian authorities say Sukuks can help to not only bridge the country's fiscal deficit, but also fund much-needed infrastructural investments. As Yasser Hakim tells us, the North African state expects its borrowing needs to rise by over 7% to $68.1 billion.
It's taken more than 6 years to get the green light from Parliament for the government to start issuing the Islamic bonds, commonly known as Sukuk. These are bonds without a fixed interest rate and are linked to projects. Their return fluctuates depending on the project's profits and losses and are guaranteed by state assets, hence described as sovereign bonds.
It's better than conventional loan mechanisms. There will be higher return on investments because the risk is higher. It will attract new sources of foreign direct investment from rich Islamic countries straight into the Sukuk because of the confidence in the Egyptian economy and its performance during the last few years.
The North African country is in the midst of a huge rebuilding process and is constructing new cities, new roads, ports, upgrading infrastructure, transport and railway systems. It needs huge funding, prompting the government to tap into this reclusive $2.7 trillion market. The Sukuk bonds law has been met with several objections before being ratified, mainly because of fears of having to sell Egypt's sovereign assets to bond owners. But the government has moved swiftly to calm those fears. Authorities have denied rumors that it will sell or lease strategic locations such as the Suez Canal or even the Grand Pyramids to issue the Sukuk.
All the information is false. You issue sukuk on projects that are related to assets, not the asset itself. It has nothing to do with the Suez Canal or High Dam. These are just rumors. The thing is, you establish projects and issue sukuk as bonds to finance the projects in return for profit sharing. The buyer doesn't have any partnership or ownership in the asset. The buyer only has rights on the revenue and the interest of the project he financed.
The government is set to establish a company that will oversee the state assets and projects to be funded by the Sukuk bonds. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Tunisia is pinning hopes on Eastern European visitors to revive its battered tourism sector. Revenue from the North African nation's vital tourism industry has plunged by more than 60% following a pandemic-induced travel slump. But now, with up to 10 flights a week arriving at its main airport, mostly from Russia and Eastern Europe since May, Tunisian officials are holding out hope for at least 1 million tourists this year. From Tunis, here's CGTN's Adnan Chauchi with the details.
The Tourism and Transport departments in Tunisia have announced that the country has received more than 90 flights from Central and Eastern Europe since the resumption of tourist flights on April 19. 14,000 travelers have visited the country in 3 months. Over 350 tourist flights from Russian, Central and Eastern Europe are scheduled for June.
We have agreed with our partners in the countries that have chosen Tunisia as a destination for the summer holidays to ease the entry and departure procedures. We have respected all conditions to ensure the safety of hotel units and tourist areas. To guarantee the success of this operation, we are working with the Ministries of Transport, ICT, Culture, as well as Environment and Agriculture departments.
The Minister of Tourism and Handicrafts described Tunisia as a COVID-safe tourist destination. Authorities in the North African state say they are expecting hundreds of flights in July.
We are expecting more flights despite the COVID-19 crisis. Tunisia's health protocol has already proved its efficiency. It has been approved by foreign tour operators. We have also launched a digital promotional campaign for the Tunisia destination. After 12 months of uncertainty, we are hoping to revive tourism this season.
The tourism department has put in place a strict health protocol for tourists, as well as tourism professionals. The plan has been approved by the Scientific Committee and the COVID-19 Task Force.
We have imposed strict enforcement on the health protocol. Our aim is to resume normal activity while protecting lives.
The Office of Civil Aviation and Airports announced that Tunis-Carthage International Airport has received the ACI Airport Health Accreditation awarded by the Airports Council International. The accreditation is granted to airports which apply the proper international standards against the spread of the coronavirus. Tunisia has launched the COVID-19 vaccination campaign for tourism professionals across the country. The inoculation campaign is aimed at jump-starting the vital tourism industry, which has been battered by the pandemic. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. Corruption purge at CAF sees 5 top officials sent home by the new executive.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
The Confederation of African Football has laid off at least 5 top officials. Ex-President Ahmed's Chief of Staff, the Director of Legal Affairs and the Head of Finance are on the list. While the layoffs have been branded as a purge against corruption in CAF, a number of administrative employees not linked to graft have also been fired. CGTN's Adam Makhroui reports.
Few months after he stood at the helm of CAF, Beatrice Marshall said sponsors didn't want to engage with Africa's football governing body, referring to his predecessor's corruption legacy. Accordingly, Marshall announced that the organization should, quote, clean its house. A wave of layoffs followed that announcement.
Wave 1 of the layoffs began a while back. It included 15 people. The second wave has begun this week. The positions and the number of employees are appearing gradually, yet how big this wave is remains unclear. The most prominent was Mustafa Abdullah, who managed Ahmed's office. He said he was sacked for political reasons, for whom he served rather than what he did.
Ahmed's Chief of Staff, the Director of Legal Affairs and Compliance, and the Finance Department's head have been swept away along with a number of employees in their department. Yet as this massive administrative restructuring continued, the exodus included figures whose position don't appear to relate to Ahmed's corruption case.
This is not an anti-Egyptian movement, but because the CAF headquarters is in Egypt, most of the employees are Egyptian, and therefore more Egyptians have been sacked than other nationalities.
Some say the decision was made to balance out the number of employees so each African region would have an equal number of staff in CAF to balance out the North African dominance. Unofficially, some in CAF said the PwC audit report is behind the sacking, which is not so clear at all.
The heads of human resources and information technology, as well as almost the entire IT team, got blown away. Some analysts agree, though, that this administrative restructuring is a FIFA-inspired movement rather than a Motsepe vision.
I believe it's a FIFA-led movement. All these layoffs have been given the green light by the new CAF Secretary General, who worked in FIFA and who is known to be one of Gianni Infantino's trusted aides. I believe that's the most reasonable explanation. Why are they doing so? That will be clearer in the coming months.
The election saw 4 candidates who accepted to nominate only one of them as CAF president. This was sponsored by Infantino. He wants to control the African Confederation so he can end financial corruption. The Congolese Secretary General Veron was a prominent figure in FIFA.
Whether these layoff waves are FIFA movements to cleanse African football from corruption or they're a plot to solidify FIFA's dominance over CAF, they're not expected to last. Most probably, real and lasting change should come within Africa to be more effective. Adel Makhroui, CGTN, Cairo.
To cycling now, and Rwanda is looking forward to sending its team to the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games after more than a year of no competition due to the global pandemic. The sport made a comeback with the 2021 Tour du Rwanda in May this year. CGTN's Mohamed Abubakar tells us more.
The 2021 Tour de Rwanda in May marked the return of cycling in the East African nation after a year of lockdown due to the global pandemic. With the Tokyo 2020 Games around the corner, the Rwanda Cycling Federation has shortlisted 4 cyclists before selecting their representatives to the Olympics.
We have chosen those 4 according to their performance during Rwanda Cycling Cup, during Tour de Rwanda for those past 3 editions, starting from 2019. We were watching who is performing well among all athletes we have in the country, and we came up with the 4 who are better than others.
Rwanda has one guaranteed spot for the road race in Tokyo 2020, but there's still a possibility the country can secure 2 further slots by the end of June.
Among those 4, we will choose. If we are given one position, one athlete, we'll choose one. If 3, we'll choose among the 4. We choose the best of 3. They trained, even until now they trained from home.
Samuel Mugisha, the 2018 Tour de Rwanda champion, is one of the 4 cyclists hoping to be selected for the Tokyo Games. It has not been an easy year for the 23-year-old as he seeks to regain his form in time for the Olympics.
When there is no COVID, we have many races, we train, we don't have any problem. But on this time, then when COVID comes, it stops everything. No races, no training, we train at home. And if you train without racing, your performance will not be the same.
Mugisha is eyeing to produce Rwanda's first ever finish at the competitive Olympics road race. He is also hoping featuring at Tokyo 2020 will be an opportunity to be scouted by professional cycling teams.
It's something big in my career. As any athlete, like everyone wish to go there. It's a big race. You know, it's my wish. As I want to be a professional, I think if I go there and make good things, we'll be opening to get some teams. I think that's why it will be important to go there for me.
Mohamed Abubakar, CGTN, Rwanda.
To European football now. Germany got their first win in Group F of the ongoing Euro 2020.